thank you for joining us today. Thrive While Loving an Addict. This is KL Wells, and I am joined by Kathy Wrenn, who has come to me through mutual friend, which I love how this works, the connectivity in the community of family recovery. And I'm thrilled to have her on today because in so many ways, there's just so many intersections that we share relative to our own journeys as moms and as spouses and who we are in the world and how we kind of came to understanding how to navigate this journey. And so Kathy also spent 20 plus years as a health education teacher in the school system in Richmond, Virginia, which that's back roots for me in the olden days. That's part of my heritage, and was actually blessed enough in some respects to be involved in prevention and early intervention programming within the school system. So she kind of had a leg up on what was happening with her son, and we'll get into that in a little bit. She has since then become a coach with BALM Family Recovery, which I am very familiar with and am very much a proponent and advocate for. And they're just in the process, hopefully wrapping up a documentary that I'm very excited about and hopefully will be available to the public late spring, maybe early summer. And we will talk about that also. So welcome, Kathy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Absolutely. So let's start with kind of the origin story. And one of the things that I've heard you talk about is also weave this in is the list of 25 risk factors. And we're going to add that to the show notes so people have access to that information. So if you would just kind of start us from your beginning and your journey.
Okay. So how the risk factors played in, one, I actually know about them through my, teaching and working with parents at our school and sharing that information with them. And I was doing that before my son even started as a teenager experimenting with substances. And so I knew through these risk factors that my son was at risk. And I knew to keep an eye on him because there are like 15 things on the list. And it's things like genetic predisposition and it runs in our family. So, and I'm always very honest with our two boys about that fact because they were at risk. And then just like poor impulse control and sensation seeking, ADHD, anxiety, depression, antisocial behavior, early substance use. We know from studies that 9 out of 10 people that have a substance use disorder started by the time they were 18. So
yes.
So that statistic, along with this list, substance using peers. And so for every risk factor, there is a protective factor. So our son had anxiety. So we had him starting with a therapist when he was 9. And so he's always been very comfortable working with someone because he started early on.
Yeah.
To help him with his temperament and so forth. So for every risk factor, there is that protective factor, but we could put all those things in place. And what was happening is that it wasn't going to stop Tucker from using. Like he said, the first time he used a substance, the light switch went off and he was like, this marijuana is like making me feel normal because it's slowing my brain down. And between his anxiety and his ADHD, the answer in his mind. So he started taking his prescribed medication because it wasn't working in his eyes because it wasn't giving him that immediate feeling.
Right.
Yeah. And then the other thing where this list came in and played not only for me and my awareness, but it also allowed me to share this list with my husband who was not on the same page with me and say, look, this is why I'm concerned. I know you think he's just experimenting because that's what teenagers do. And he was trying to normalize it. And I said, but this is why I'm concerned. And I said, look at this list and mark all the things on it that you see in Tucker. And he went through the list and marked almost every one of them. And he's like, oh my God, we have a problem.
Right.
Because the number of risk factors, the more you have, the more at risk. Now, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to have a substance use disorder, but it highly, impacts whether someone will or not.
Well, and I think this is one of the kind of conundrums, certainly for parents that have teenagers, is how do you determine between, oh, they're just experimenting, which in this day and time, because of fentanyl, is hugely like Russian roulette, or they're going to have significant issues. And so I love the fact that there's this list that people can reference. And then how you talked about, I mean, I probably was kind of unintentionally, unknowingly, I would say, probably doing some of the same things that you were doing to counter what the risk factors were without knowing what the risk factors were. Yeah. So if you would speak a little bit about, like, what was your initial reaction when the lights began to come on for you as a mom?
So I often teasingly say this, but it's the truth. And that is, as parents, we're kind of part-time detective when we've got teenagers too, right? What's going on in their life. They're not always forthcoming. And so to kind of read between the lines and because Tucker did struggle with some of these risk factors, I was always, I would say I probably overcompensated for him. Not so ultimately his progression in developing some skills, but I also saw him not developing those skills because he was using a substance. But at the time, I did not know that he was using as heavily as he was. So the other list that really helped me was the DSM-5 list, where you can go through those questions and it will tell you, okay, there's a low, moderate, or severe use disorder. And so that was another list that I showed my husband. He was like, oh yeah, he's at severe. So there was no more denying it. So I think we can use these resources to help us, again, us stay out of denial or help our partner through this. But I had to have a lot of patience with Robert too, because we were not on the same page, and that could have been detrimental to our marriage. And there were times when it was like we saw a therapist to get on the same page, and she was trained in substance use disorder. So it really did help us come together. And it was important for him to hear from somebody besides his wife.
Absolutely.
Yes, I'm trained in this to a certain extent, but I'm not a therapist, a trained therapist, and I wasn't at that time. So I was a drug ed teacher, but I didn't know, I wasn't prepared for my son to go down this road.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody is.
I don't think anybody is either. And as much as you were in it as a teacher, it's a different ballgame when it is your son or your daughter or somebody that you love deeply. I mean, I've said numerous times, I think loving deeply is a courageous act. And so going from oh my goodness, I wasn't prepared for my son to be in this space. What were your next kind of steps in terms of kind of getting yourself into a place of, next steps? What were the next steps?
So I did a lot of educating myself. I have a bookshelf, right?
Yeah, we all do.
Yeah. One of my go-tos, and I use those with families that I work with or in my support groups. But I also, people told me to go to a meeting, like our interventionist said, go to a meeting. To me, I love my meetings. I love my community. But what I was finding in those meetings, it wasn't enough. And so something that we're really stressing in the documentary that we're making is that, yes, meetings give us community. It's one of the pillars or one of the dimensions of recovery. But it's not the end all be all. Like education is, and that's what I was looking for. I'm a doer. So tell me I can't control it. I can't cure it. I didn't cause it, but what can I do? And so that's when I found the BALM and some other resources that provided tools for me and helped me develop skills. And practicing those skills has been transformational in my journey for not just my loved one, but my marriage, my other relationships. I mean, I often call the BALM my relationship manual because it's helped me with my life.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
get my life back and me have
Right.
peace that I did not have for a long time.
Right, right. And I think that's one of the big things too is in the mommy code that that's how I think about it is we're supposed to fix them. We're supposed to take care of them. We're supposed to keep them safe. And this is a completely rewiring of that code where we really do have to come back to ourselves and figure out a way to get to peace and calm, and to navigate our own journey while they're going through their experience. And so, could you speak a little bit about that transition for you from I wasn't prepared for this, oh my goodness, and then, okay, I have to come at this really differently than what I thought?
Mhm. So it kind of happened. This is kind of how I picture it when I describe it to people. I say I looked in the mirror one day and I didn't recognize who I had become, meaning I was somebody, I was not aligned with my values. I
Mm,
wanted to have a peaceful home. I was not contributing to that peaceful home. Tucker and
mhm.
I were, and Tucker's my son, and I'm going to say his name. So he's open and okay with that. But Tucker and I would
Yes.
go at it with each other. I mean, we were like oil and vinegar, and we would just, I participated in the
Mhm,
chaos. And
mhm,
so I decided I'm no longer going to do this.
mhm,
And so I heard somebody say the other day, when the family changes, recovery begins. And it's
mhm,
so true. I changed and then it trickled out into that ripple effect. It trickled
mhm.
out into my entire family. But it took one person, and we call it
Right.
the power of one in BALM,
Right.
one person to change. And I started setting those healthy boundaries. And
Mhm.
one of them was I'm no longer going to participate in these conversations that get escalated.
Yeah.
Right? And so let's come up with a plan on if one of us is feeling that way on how we're going to stop, and then we can come back to again later. And that was
Mhm,
the first change that I made.
mhm,
And
mhm,
because I said I do not want to raise two boys, because it was happening with my other son too, because we were, we were a dysfunctional family at that point.
mhm. Sure.
And and so I said to both of them, I don't want you to speak to a woman like you are right now, let alone your mother.
Mhm,
And so I have to step up and say, I'm no longer going to participate.
mhm,
And I'm telling you, it worked. I mean, it
mhm,
was, they didn't like it at first, but it
mhm,
worked. Before
mhm.
I had that conversation with them,
Did
I would walk away and they would just follow me and go, well, walk away, because that's what you do when you get mad or I get mad. So they didn't understand that I was walking away because I didn't feel safe. So when
Oh,
at a
okay.
calm moment, we were able to have this conversation, not in the heat of the moment, but we
Yeah.
sat down one day and had this
Mhm,
conversation. It was like the light bulbs went off. Ah, okay.
mhm,
You're right, mom. We would take our personal timeouts and then we were fine. And same thing
mhm,
with a phone call. I would say, I love you, but I'm going to hang up right now. Let's talk later.
mhm,
But I would
mhm,
stop. I would not participate anymore.
mhm.
That started the change.
Okay, so there's an intention, there's a knowing that this is what I need to do, and then there's doing it.
Yeah.
And I think for some people, obviously, there's a deep breath, before you really do kind of step into this way of being, and then there's the practice of doing it.
Yeah, I had to script it out and really get my
Okay.
brain around it. It was not gonna
Yes.
happen because we are in our almost like the white matter in our brain, so like that fight, flight, freeze, our
Yes.
polyvagal system, and that's what makes it when people are like, "I have a really hard time having conversations with my loved one," and that's because we're in that
Mhm.
freeze or flight mode. So
We're right here.
yeah, so like you said, I had to learn how to be the peace.
Mhm.
And so I used to actually say that that was like something I would say in my head while I was breathing, be the peace, when I could feel
Mhm.
myself getting
Mhm.
escalated. And
Right.
I could, I could say, okay, I'm going to walk away right now because I'm feeling unsafe.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
unsafe, I think people think it means from physical. It can be emotional too. I mean,
Oh.
emotional is probably worse because
Mhm.
we take it so much thinking that we have to stay there and
Mhm.
won't realize what it's doing to us physically and
Right.
emotionally. So,
Yes.
but yeah, it was
Yes.
slow. It did not happen overnight.
Mhm.
It took me really practicing on my own and then feeling like, okay, I'm ready to do this. And I had to get, just like our Tucker said, I had to get sick and tired of living like this to make a change. I had to, as mama, get sick and tired of living this way and say, I'm going to start showing up differently. He may or may not change, but I'm going to take care of me. And it, again, it trickles out. It's contagious.
Is it? I totally hear you. And so where was Robert in this part of the journey for you? Was he watching you?
Yeah. So I would say early on, he was watching and he was the peacekeeper. So we all have roles to play. And so I was the emotional punching bag for my son. Like I was the one that he was going to lash out at. He was never physical with me, but I was his safe space because he knew I loved him deeply.
Right.
We were not healthy together, but he would lash out at me. He would not lash out at his dad. And it wasn't because he was scared of his dad. It was just that wasn't his person to lash out. And so that's, again, where I had to step in and say, okay, I want our relationship to look differently. So meantime, Robert was the peacekeeper and so when I joined the BALM, he did not want to participate right away. It was one of those things like, if you want to do this, go for it. It sounds great, but I'm too busy, but you go ahead and do this. But we did have the therapist together. So he was committed to doing some things. So it's not like, and we did go to support groups together. So I am lucky that he was participating in those ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But the education piece, he was like, I'm too busy for that. You do it. Tell me some things. And so I would listen to the recordings and I would say, do you want me to put my earpods in and you can, because you're sitting there reading a book? He's like, no, it's good. Just listen to it. So he was listening without missing.
That's great. That's great. I love it.
And then at some point he said, can I read that book? But I never pushed it on him. I just did it around him. He was noticing I was showing up differently. And I'm so happy to see that. Like he talks now and he gets tears in his eyes. And he really does. He's very emotional about the fact that he watched Tucker and I heal.
Wow.
And that is what brought him into it. It was like, this is happening in front of me and I want to be a part of it.
Wow. That's beautiful.
Thank you. It gives me goosebumps to talk about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I've had this experience in my own marriage and we're still not on the same page, but I'm doing my thing. Obviously, I'm doing this podcast and all the things I'm doing. And I've really leaned into, which is what I appreciate about listening to you, is just everybody has their own journey.
Yes. And you know what helped me with that was learning about the stages of change.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because as I learned about the stages of change, knowing that there's pre-contemplation or contemplation and then planning and all the stages that we go through, we can apply that to our own lives with any habit we want to change. And for this, when I was learning about that, I had this aha moment like, okay, not only do I need to be aware of my stages of change, I need to be aware of Tucker's stages of change where that gives me empathy and compassion for him. Knowing we're not on the same page, and then I need to give him space to go through those stages. Same thing for my husband. And when I had that aha moment, that's when I was like, okay, I can invite him every now and then. Like if I went to a workshop or something, I would say, look, no pressure, but this is what I'm going to do. And if you'd like to join me, I'd love for us to do this together. And again, in a loving, compassionate way, invite him, but not put the pressure on him. And when I started showing up in that way, and let me tell you, I was a fixer and a doer and a politician. I had like a full speed ahead train going 150, and I had to learn to slow down.
Right. I mean, I think we're probably a lot cut from the same cloth that way. And yes, I mean, I think about the gifts and opportunities for learning and growth in this whole experience for myself. And oh my goodness. And that's one of them. Slow down, breathe, take care of myself, be the calm in the storm, hold space for others in their own journey. Just the notion that everybody has their own unfolding.
Exactly.
And to stop, kind of check myself at the door about the rules of what I think should be happening in my marriage or what I think should be happening, or that's a bridge too far, on peace out, relaxing those and really kind of marinating in what's the truth here.
Well, and thank you for bringing that up, because that what comes to mind when you just said that was the fact that society has given us messages, right, about addiction, substance use disorder, and I do not align myself with some of those messages. And so one of the things that really spoke to me, especially when I was in some support groups, I had to almost do speed dating support groups, because some of them were not healthy for me. But then
Right.
I found, and they were the same type of support group, whether it was Family Anonymous or Al-Anon, Nar-Anon. But it's finding the group of people that you feel like you connect with. Same thing with therapists. Same thing. And not all therapists are created equal in that
Exactly.
they're not trained. Some of them are not trained in substance use disorder. So it's really hard for them to sit in your space and work through that. And some are coming from, they're not trained in family recovery. They understand, that for the loved one. So it's really trying to figure out, where is my space in all this? Who are my safe people? And realizing that it's like trying a new recipe and saying, okay, I don't like salmon because I tried this recipe. Well, it might not be the salmon. It might be
a
the
recipe.
recipe, right? So it's
Right.
the same type of thing. But what I realized was that I wanted a program that aligned with my values, and that I love my son deeply, and I'm not abandon him in that journey. And so again, that's where I found the BALM and other like-minded kind of programs, where that's where I'm going to put my effort. And what I was learning in those programs, they were dispelling, they were deconstructing, right?
Yes.
Some of those messages that I was hearing in those support groups or in those meetings are from society.
Yeah, I'm totally in alignment with you. I mean, I'm a business coach and consultant. And in my world, 95% of your success or failure is directly determined by who you surround yourself with, which is true, period, in life. And certainly in these circumstances. And I had a very similar experience. I was pretty clear that I wanted to learn how to be the calm in the storm. I was pretty clear that I wanted to learn how to thrive, even in the midst of my son's dealing with substance use disorder. And that was just not the language or the intentionality that I found in the groups in my community. And so at that time, I didn't know. I think BALM existed when in the earlier days, but I didn't know it was out there. And so again, just kind of cobbling all of this together on myself and being surprised that there wasn't more out there along these lines, because in no way, shape, or form was I going to do the same thing either. I loved my son immensely, and to think of just like cutting him off, like that was just inconceivable to me. But how do you do that in a way that you're not contributing to the disease? And you're not going down the drain of despair and chaos. And what I see on a lot of the Facebook groups is people are just so angry. They're so angry. They can't change this. And then, so it just like, I think it's a hijack for them too. That's the disease that they've been hijacked by. And I was like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah. And I think we spoke earlier about the education piece is huge. I mean, and to me, knowledge is power. We've all heard that. But I would add, knowledge is power, but practice of the things that we're learning is transformation.
Correct.
Right? So
yes.
I mean, we can sit with that knowledge and do nothing with it. And that's power, right? It's only when we put it into action.
Absolutely. I mean, how many times have you said, well, I knew I shouldn't be smoking? And I used to think, honestly, Kathy, I used to think if they just knew, they would do better. And then I finally woke up and went, no, that isn't actually true. So we can know and not do better. We can know and still be miserable. And so I'm totally in alignment with you from that perspective. Let me ask you this, and this, I mean, this is such a big bucket, but as a mom and going through this, what was your biggest challenge?
My biggest challenge, I would say, golly, there's so many. Well, one of them for me was that Tucker made his situation very public. And we live in a city, but a very small community within a city. And so I would say one of my challenges was how I felt like people were looking at me differently. And they
Okay.
were. I mean, we lost some friends for a while. We lost. So I mean, I was isolating. I was not taking care of myself. I was, and you definitely go through a grief process with this. Son was still alive, but I was grieving the son that I thought I was going to have, the dream that I had for him and for our family. Our family
Right.
was very unhealthy, and so just working through the grief process, working through the stigma that society has and how people were looking at us and me going deeper and deeper into my, I think, depression with this, and then just trying to get myself out of it. So it really, like, I think people might think, okay, my challenge was my son. My challenge was with me. And again, when I got out of that space and said, I'm no longer want to live like this. I'm not aligned with my values. I need to do something differently. It's no different than when we decide we're going to start exercising and eating better. And it's the same thing. So recovery is wellness. I was a coordinator for our school, and it's based in the 8 dimensions of wellness. How are we taking care of ourselves? When we lose that, how are we supposed to take care of anybody else in our circle?
Right, right. I mean, a number of people, well, almost every exec that I work with has something that they're dealing with personally in their lives because we're just human. And when a tougher thing shows up, they tend to let go of the things that are the self-care component. And I was like, no, you need to ratchet up. And I have been very clear, at least in the last 4 to 5 years, that anytime something really more challenging came up, like learning that Sam was addicted to fentanyl, that was a holy, holy moly moment. At the same time, I was like, okay, I need to up my skills. So I pulled Eckhart Tolle off the shelf again. I pulled Katie Byron off the shelf again, or Byron Katie. And I just kept upping it so that I could stay centered and as calm as possible or peaceful as possible in the midst of what was happening. And so then I could access, okay, what are the gifts and opportunities embedded in this experience for me? And I think that's a bold question on the front end for a lot of people.
Right. Because I mean, I think immediately I went to victim and I was just overwhelmed by it. And then I was like, I can't sit in this any longer or we're not going to survive this.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask you, because this is one of the things that I find a lot of people struggle with is how did you help yourself sleep at night?
Okay. So I love mindfulness. And so and I'm also like, I believe in mind over body. Right. And so
Right.
I practiced, and some people, I think it takes a lot of practice. So, but I have always practiced that I am going to have a visual of something. And then, some people count sheep, right?
Right.
But if we are sitting in that worry loop, we're not going to be able to go to sleep. And so I encourage people to journal, to write, turn off the lights, and allow ourselves and find a routine that works for us. So for me, it was journaling, writing things down. If I wake up, if I'm having trouble going to sleep and I need to release something, I'm going to put it on my pad next to my bed. Okay, now it's on paper. I don't have to think about it anymore. That was my first step. And then after that, I'm not kidding you, it worked for me. I have this beautiful hidden garden in the back of my yard, and I love gardening. So I can literally picture myself walking down the path to my garden, and I will fall asleep before I get to my garden.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm sitting there breathing. I'm just
Right.
relaxing my
Right.
brain. I'm not thinking about anything else,
Okay.
but I can do that. And so it didn't happen right away. I had to train
Right.
myself at first. I walked to the garden and I wasn't working like, okay, I'm going to move this plant over here. And because you're
Mhm.
thinking too much, it was more
Mhm.
about just being in the garden, looking at my flowers, smelling my flowers, just being peaceful.
Mhm.
And then I would fall asleep. But now I can't even get back to the garden before I fall asleep.
That's great. Ah. Well, I think it's really important for people to hear that all of this is a practice. All of this is skilling up, as I say. And so a lot of us deal with anxiety and monkey mind and all of those things. And so if you just begin and continue to practice, you will continue to get better at it. It's an intentional action to take these tools and put them to practice like we're talking about. So I want people to understand that neither one of us started here. We started in desperation and oh my goodness. And the moments where we dropped to our knees and completely lost it. And and we're risers.
Yes. I love that visual. Yes.
Okay. Mhm.
Rise
Yeah.
above. Yeah.
Yes. Exactly. I mean, and so what I think about is it's transcendence for me is rising and including
Mhm.
because all of this, all the trauma, the drama, the crises, the desperation has been in service of my own higher evolution and Sam's and has created a reach out into the world to hopefully give people a different perspective and hopefully to be able to see that yes you can.
Mhm. Well, and I don't know how you feel about this, but we talk about this in our support groups. And one of the things that I let people know is that I wouldn't wish this journey on anyone, but
Mhm.
I choose to live in the space of looking at the gifts that it's given me in as a person for my
Yes.
well-being, the
Mhm.
gifts it's giving our marriage, the gift that it's giving my relationship with my son. Like we are so
Mhm.
close now.
Mhm. Mhm.
And we would not have what we have today if we hadn't been through this. I truly don't
Right.
think so. We
Yeah.
are compassionate, non-judgmental, loving people that want to help other people. And I'm very thankful.
Mhm. Mhm. I'm in the same place you are, even at the moments that brought me to my knees.
Mm,
Even almost simultaneously, I knew this was going to serve because I think of everything as an opportunity I guess, elevate in terms of consciousness and to elevate in terms of my own humanity and what my purpose is on the planet while I'm here. And so I also see the disease in and of itself as a way to call us to rise.
mm,
So I believe that when you feel like things are falling apart, that they're actually falling together.
interesting.
Mhm. It's been my truth for decades now is that those moments when I thought, oh my God, my life is literally imploding. And I take a deep breath and I go, as painful as this is right now, I actually know that it's falling together.
Mm,
And I wouldn't be who I am today, nor would you be who you are today without these parts of our journey.
mhm.
So
That kind of reminds me of, I think one of our biggest fears as we're going through this and our loved one has found maybe started their recovery journey and they
mhm,
are starting to get some momentum. And then our son decided, I know I can't smoke marijuana. I'm not going to use cocaine anymore and these other things, but I want to see if I can go to a brewery with my buddies or go to a wine tasting.
mhm,
And so he told us he was going to do this. And instead of us panicking, because we had already really dug deep into our own recovery, we were very open to it and just said, this is something for you to work through. And
mhm,
as long as you have someone that you can talk to about this, and it's not
mhm,
us because we don't want to be your professionals.
mhm.
He had a mentor at the time. And so they talked about it and he decided he was going to try it. He got a DUI. And he called us and he was really upset about it. And our response, because of what the work we had done, was, gosh, that stinks. That's too bad that happened. But what are you thinking that your next steps are? And he said, well, I'm going to sell my car to pay for the lawyer. And, and of course that's what we were thinking. Right. But we didn't tell him that. We let him have the space to work through it. And he said, I've already called all of my team and I've got a meeting with my life coach and my therapist and a meeting with my mentor, and we're going to work through this. And we were so proud of him. He was so proud of himself because we gave him the space and the respect that he could figure this out. And because he was in a place where we knew he could.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, number one, they're incredibly resourceful and they're wickedly smart. And so, yes, they can. And yes, okay, this is what happened. Consequences.
Yeah.
How are you going to navigate this?
Consequences. Yeah.
Yes.
But there are times when I can tell you that Tucker was not in a space where he was capable of making decisions. And he was so sick at one point. He had gotten down to like 126 pounds and he was a 6 foot, 200-pound guy. So so we ended up intervening and getting him to a doctor and getting some blood work done and finding out what's really going on here. And it turned out he had Lyme's disease, and plus he was using the substances. But we were able to get him in a place where he could then be in a healthier spot where then he could make decisions or we could collaborate on what are the next steps.
Right.
But there are times when I do think, and some people will say, no, they've got to work through this. And I think it's important that we know as family members, it's okay for us to step in like we would for anybody else and help them work through it.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, there was a moment when Sam went into psychosis and he was kind of wandering the streets of a city in Washington State. And we live in Oregon. And as soon as I realized on the phone that that's what was happening, I was like, okay, we need to go up there. And we need to find him. And that was what led to his arrest. But in his arrest, number one, I believe it actually saved him. And we didn't know if he would come out of the psychosis. It's very scary. And eventually he did. And he has a remarkable memory about all these things that I would not have ever thought.
That's unusual though, like after psychosis.
Yes. But what I would say is, yes, it's not an either or. It's not like we're going to not have anything to do with you or we're going to be involved in your entire journey. There is a scale, a landscape to navigate. And there are those moments when intervening is really, really important.
Yeah.
So,
and that's where I think a coach can really help. Like we've got coaches and I do think that it can really help, especially when you are early on in this journey and you don't know when to help and when to step back. And again, society might be telling you one thing and that might be just detrimental. And nobody, I mean, at the end of the day, the family has the right to make the decision on what they can and cannot live with. And so nobody should be telling a family what they should do. It's really up to them figuring out where are my values in this and how can I help support recovery and provide opportunities for recovery. Whereas what we were doing at times was supporting continued use without realizing it with some of the actions, like supplementing rent when he had enough money then to buy the drugs.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I remember going up to Washington, right? Actually, I just drove up to actually see if I could see him at his house at that point, just to tell him that I loved him. But the story from him was they've shut off my water, I think it was, blah, blah, blah. I need some money to turn the water back on. And I get up there and his water's on. So those are all part of the piece of the journey too. So we're kind of coming up on our time here. What I did want you to talk about is what was the inspiration for the documentary and when will it be out?
Thank you.
Because I'm super excited about this for you and for our community of recovery.
Yes, thank you. So We decided to make this documentary. It was something that I had thought about for like 5 years, and I shelved it with the idea that I just don't have the time that to raise the money for it and to make it happen. And then I believe things happen for a reason sometimes.
Mhm.
And I have a very strong faith. So I do believe that things came together because it was meant to be. And I truly believe that. I'm passionate about this because when I was starting this, even though I was a drug ed teacher, faced as a mother with this situation, I didn't know what I didn't know.
Mhm.
And I didn't know where to find resources in our community
Mhm.
or elsewhere.
Right.
Uh, and so I don't want any family to feel like that. And
Yeah.
because there are resources out there, especially today compared to what we had 10 years ago, 5 years ago.
Right.
So what we're hoping to do with this documentary is one, to show families that there is something that they can do, you know,
Mhm.
that we do have some control, not control over our loved one, except that we can learn how to provide opportunities and we can control how we are showing up
Mhm.
in the relationship. And so it's really that we want it to be that aha moment for the family to be open minded to learning that there is a way for them to help support recovery
Yes.
in a kind, compassionate way.
Mhm.
So, and foster that recovery process for the family and also the loved one. But the
Great.
focus will be on the family.
Fantastic.
Okay. You see all these movies,
Mhm.
it's all about
Mhm.
the loved one. The family's part of it. And
Mhm.
but there are no answers, right?
Mhm.
There's rarely a phone number or anything at the end of it to call.
Mhm.
But it's just
Mhm.
this sends you into this space of, in some ways, I can remember sitting in some of these theaters and sitting there not wanting to get up because I was put back in my trauma mode,
Right. Right.
it sent me back. So we want this to be a documentary of hope and love and showing that there is a way for the family to heal. We have 3 families that we're following their stories. So it'll be storytelling, and then we're weaving in 5 experts. And so we'll have evidence-based information and best practices that we'll be talking about in the recovery arena. At the end of the documentary, there will be a QR code to direct people to our website where we will have a family recovery hub, and it'll show the resources that we will be saying that we are kind of like-minded. We have vetted them.
Mhm.
It will all be, again, resources that believe in that compassionate, loving approach.
Mhm.
Um, and then it's up to everybody to kind of dig in and see which direction they want to go. But that's our goal. And then we will also we've got all this really beautiful footage. And so we will kind of make these little educational lessons out of them.
Great.
Some of them and put them on.
Mhm.
We've got Kevin McCauley, Danielle Dick, and Jan Brown are experts, 3 of our experts that we will make sure that people can hear some of the things that might not make the film, but,
Mhm.
they're beautiful resources that we can share.
Well, as you and I talked earlier, is I was thrilled to see that Dr. Kevin McCauley was part of this documentary because his video, Pleasure Unwoven, was pivotal probably 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, in me reframing
Mhm.
this disease. And so so I'm a big fan.
Yeah. We were
Mhm.
excited to have him, and it did the same for me and also our other producers. So it was, we want our documentary to be kind of like that, where
Mhm.
Pleasure Unwoven is shown at most family workshops and, treatment centers for the loved one, and then for the family weekends. So we want our documentary to hopefully be the same type of film that will be out there for people to see at whether it's a conference, sitting in their living room. I'd like to put it out there through our distribution and have some screenings where we actually are there and we can have group discussions, and we
Mhm.
will have a panel with our producers, and really because it will lend itself to that. It's going to be an opportunity for people to learn and discuss and talk about their fears and where they hope to move forward.
Mhm. Well, and as you and I have talked about, and my experience has been, it has been more challenging for me to find families that have a story like yours to have on our podcast, because the main focus and most of the dollars go towards the addict or the person dealing with substance use disorder, instead of the family or the community they're going to come back to. And to have examples of healing, thriving, being the calm in the storm, being the peace in the moment. We need more and more and more of those examples so that we can move in the direction of what we're seeing, and that people can begin to really truly realize and embrace the notion that yes, you can.
Yes, I talked to a treatment center the other day, and they said their primary focus is family education. I'm like, they see, and there are, I actually know of a handful of them now, and I don't refer to any treatment centers that do not have a good family program, because to me, then the loved ones coming back to the family unit, and in some way, whether they're living there or not, they're still, connected to that family. And if the family has not had the education or started developing skills to support recovery, then that's why we've got this revolving door.
Right.
With the loved one going back into treatment.
Exactly. And the surprising thing for some people, maybe not others, is that the vast majority of treatment programs do not have a family program, because the money's not there. And
they can't bill for it.
Right.
They can't bill for it.
Right.
So they
exactly.
Yeah.
So they don't do it. Yeah. So that's another whole.
Oh yeah, that would be another whole discussion.
Right. That's another whole conversation.
But
so
we do hope that this will show treatment centers that the family needs to be included, and don't keep them at arm's length and say they're part of the problem, because that's what a lot of loved ones are hearing, and the whole system deserves the opportunity to heal.
Yes, absolutely. So how can people get a hold of you if they want to reach out?
So my nonprofit is ILLUME, ILLUME, Family Recovery, and we have a website. And then I also, is it okay if I give you my phone number?
Absolutely. And I also want to know for our audience that the things that were referenced in today's conversation will be in our show notes and Kathy's website and so on and so forth. So just so you know that too. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So it's 804-445-9600.
Fantastic. Well, I just want to say thank you for who you are in the world and the work that you're doing and the resource that you are. I'm very, very excited to see this documentary that will, I believe, bring a different and more healthy and thriving light to family recovery and how important it is, and that we can do this. So I'm very grateful for you joining me today and for the work that you're doing. So thank you, Kathy.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.